Welcome to Never Rewrite. I'm Isaac Askew.
And I'm Jeffrey Sherman. And today we're going to talk about iterative replacement as the alternative to rewriting. So, in the first episode, we talked about full rewrites are bad, but we didn't talk about what is good. And I saw one
Right.
commenter on the internet, he made the comment, they said never rewrite, instead rewrite it. I'm like, okay, that's, we were a little vague. Episode 2, let's talk about what you should do instead of a full rewrite and why it's better.
Sure. That's a good call out.
Yes.
Yeah, I also had a similar comment from a few people. Rewrite what? So, why is replacing good? Why do we want to iteratively replace?
Well, I think we have four points on our list. Let's just kind of go through them.
Mhm.
Kind of the first one that is very important, one of the major ones, the improvements are locked in, right? They don't disappear if the project gets put on hold or canceled. Many times, I would say at least 4 times, I have seen hey, I'm going to replace my current system with a brand new system that's going to be better. It's going to be better in so many ways. And 12 months down the road, they're getting close, but management is upset. They've now been funding 2 teams for a year. They put a 6-month timeline, be cut over. And
Mhm.
then at 18 months, they're like, screw it, we're canceling the project. And all of that code, all of that time, all that money, just throw it away because they've given up.
Right.
And the rewrite project achieves nothing. And the original system lives on. And if you do an iterative replace, every time you finish something, every time you do something, it gets out there and it's locked in, it's in production. And there's never this giant load of work in progress that is at risk of getting canceled. Like at most, you could lose a week or 2 of work if management changes their mind.
Got it. So it's like your large feature branch of work, so to speak, that you keep adding more and more things to that you think it's almost ready. It's almost ready. And ends up getting punted, or maybe merging is too risky because of other things, and eventually they kind of abandon it. I think in the last episode you mentioned never write code that doesn't go into production. So this is kind of like along that same line of thought. Just keep pushing things, small minor changes to the main branch.
Right. Yeah, you touched on a major point of that is small, minor, or no, they don't have to be minor, but small things are much less risky and much easier to merge in than big things. If I'm
Yeah.
going to, do a full rewrite, the example we gave last week about the Yankees, right? They had their stadium, they went to a new stadium and destroyed the old stadium, and there was no going back. Like whatever the problems were, those were the problems. But
Right.
when you make a small change, you can always go back. Like if they just change the seats in the old stadium and everybody hated the new seats, you could rip them out and put the old, buy new seats that were the old seats.
Mhm.
But you can't undestroy the stadium, or you can't,
Right.
it's too big. The more code, the bigger the feature, the more risk it is. Whereas a small change, if you fix all the bugs, or you fix an error, or you make this part of the pipeline more efficient, none of those changes is particularly risky on its own. Whereas, hey, I'm going to rewrite the whole thing in a new language. You don't find out the risk, you don't find out all the bugs until you actually try to use it in production. And so it's much riskier.
Yeah, and I think that's a good rule of thumb for pretty much any code. It's almost like that, like the concept of like keeping your PRs or MRs small in
Mm-hmm.
general. So even if you're just doing a small feature, if you can keep every MR like a very small bit of logic and break it into tiny little pieces, it's easier to review. It's less risky to merge that in. So just in general, I think it's just a good rule of thumb.
Yeah, there was a study, and I don't have the reference to it, but there was a study where they were looking at a group, the Git commits of high-end developer, like well-regarded developers, and they theorized that there'd be basically 2 groups. There'd be developers who do lots and lots of little commits and merges, and then there'd be developers who do fewer, larger merges. And they were only looking at the set of, like, I think it was like Linux kernel maintainers, or something like that.
Mm.
And what they discovered is there's no one in the second group. Small continuous commits is a sign of a good of a highly productive developer. Fewer larger commits is a sign of a less productive developer, and there wasn't. Well, no, that's not what this says. Highly regarded productive developers did not do large commits.
Right.
That just wasn't how they worked, and they were surprised because it was very consistent. They just didn't do that. That's not what effective developers do.
We need to find a link to that study and throw that in the show notes.
I will look for it. I looked for it before, but I couldn't find it. But I will try again.
In that case, we'll edit that out.
I totally read it on the internet, and therefore it's true.
All right, what's the next of the 4?
The next part is that you're going to solve problems today, and you're not going to get trapped by how you imagine you're going to solve problems tomorrow. Rewrite projects. The first 6 months, it's always, I'm going to build a framework so that I can solve the problem so much more effectively than I can solve the problem with my current code. And the problem with that is you end up building a framework, and then once you have your framework perfected, then you try to figure out how you're actually going to solve the problem with the framework. And that's when you discover, I need to rewrite my rewrite to actually solve my problem. And that's, when the rubber is meeting the road and you're already late and behind. That's like when the project starts to fall apart. And so just iteratively replacing stuff, you're solving actual problems today instead of getting sidetracked into how you think you're going to solve the problems in the future.
This also kind of makes sense, not just again from a rewrite standpoint, but just from like a daily productivity standpoint. There's the famous book, Practical Object-Oriented Design in Ruby by Sandy Metz. And at one point, she's describing how to architect something with inheritance. And the analogy that she uses is bicycles. And at one point, she shows like, here's your main bicycle class. Here are the things that inherit from the bicycle class. And there were like different types of bicycles. You had a street bike, you had a mountain bike, and there was that other type of bike that you're like
recombinant.
Yeah, that one. Thanks. And she gives an example of how to kind of architect this such that you have like the shared components in the main class and then like the unique ones in the derivative classes. And then goes into a lot of other different talks about like composition over inheritance and that kind of thing too. But after showing you like an example of how to do that, she says, not necessarily in these words, but you don't do that. Basically saying that you don't have to preemptively design things this way. So you may not want to, if you're a company that just handles street bikes, for example, you don't necessarily want to go ahead and go, well, we can make code that can handle any type of bike yet. You don't need to hyper optimize and start writing code that can handle any situation. So like you're saying here, don't imagine how to solve tomorrow's problems, solve today's problems. So the same thing here, write your original class that you need. You don't necessarily need to abstract anything yet. If you're just a street bike company, make a street bike class.
Right.
So people get ahead of themselves. Yeah.
What's the phrase that Yagni, right? You ain't going to need it. Iterative replacement reduces your amount of stuff that you're going to build because you think you need it, as opposed to stuff that you actually need.
Yagni.
Rewrites encourage Yagni.
Yeah.
Next on the list, we had customers are buying what you're selling today, not what you're selling next year. This is not a technical thing. This is a remember who you're at, why you're actually doing this. You're not, it's not a hobby. If it's a hobby, go right ahead and rewrite, I guess. Whatever makes you happy. If you're a professional software developer, you're developing it for your customers. You're writing for your customers. And your customers are buying the software. They're using the software today. They're not buying it today and then, a year from now, they're going to get the newer version. I guess we're talking about more of a software that's in production, I guess, if you're being hired to. So anything you can do to make the new software in the hands of the customers faster is better, because those are the people who actually care and want to use your software.
That kind of reminds me a little bit too of last episode where we were talking about if you write code that's bad, but solves a problem or retains a customer, it's good. So it's not necessarily good quality. But I think your phrase was like, judge us not by our code, but by the impact or something like that.
Yes.
So yeah, if the overall impact is that customers start using your code immediately versus you promising customers that in 6 months you'll have something even faster for them, yeah, it's generally going to be the better solution to deliver something useful to the customer today.
Right. Remember, good and bad are entirely subjective. The code
Mhm.
could be bad from a developer point of view, but it's good from the customer's point of view.
Yeah.
And sort of the iterative rewrite idea, because you don't have that much work in progress, it's going to keep you closer to the middle ground where the code is something that you feel okay with because you're writing it now, and the customer's getting value out of it, and you don't stray into Yagni territory, I guess, where you're inventing solutions to problems that the customers don't have and you're never going to need. And it helps keep you away from, I guess, cowboy style, where you're going to make something, but you're never going to change it once it's done, and you're just going to move on to the next thing. This is, oh, okay, maybe I had to make this crazy bad hack to get the customer what they needed, and now that it's in production, I can go back and make that hack more stable and less terrible. From my personal view, the customer is happy either way. Many rewrites, sort of the part of the justification is that the existing code is so terrible that nobody understands it, and so that nobody can maintain it. And you get to the end where you've built your new framework, you've solved the problem, and now you're getting bitten by all the edge cases that you didn't know existed. And so what you have to do then, if you're going to be successful, is go through the original code that you didn't want to look at 6 months or a year ago, figure out how it works, and then make your new code work that way, which is going to certainly going to mangle your brand new wonderful framework and systems. And I guess to just acknowledge that you either have to do it at the start or you have to do it at the end, but either way, you're going to eventually have to understand the code that you're replacing. And the later you do it, the more annoying and more rework it's going to be. It's like if you've ever moved, there's like the stages of packing up your stuff, where the early stages, you look at all the stuff, you're like, oh, you sort between stuff you want to take and that you don't want to take. And then as you run out of time, you eventually just throw everything in the box and you're like, I'll just figure it out when I get there. And you then spend the time packing up the box, moving the box, unpacking the box, and then throwing stuff away. That happens to almost everyone every time. You're just like, I didn't have the time. I just threw it in a box and I paid somebody to ship it across the country.
Right.
And then I threw it away.
That's a pretty good analogy. Stay subscribed for many more colorful analogies by Jeffrey. So yeah, in the previous episode, you'd mentioned the process of figuring out what you do have so that you can make a new system gives you the opportunity to fix what you have. So that's kind of like what you're saying here is regardless at the beginning or the end of the project, you're going to have to characterize your current behavior. So you need to know what your current code does. You have to go through and see which features you're porting over. And while you're doing that, you could just improve your current system. So you could find all those areas, all the different features. That gives you a chance to go through, write documentation on how your current functionality behaves. You can add tests around that change functionality. So if you go through and find areas as you're documenting, you can kind of see how it's behaving, and then maybe even extract and test those features feature by feature, or even like smaller granular unit tests, that kind of thing.
And that gets back to why just the iterative replacement, once you have tests, once you understand what the code is doing, changing the code stops being as scary and as risky, which again decreases the value of the rewrite alternative of, oh, well, this is so terrible, we can't possibly touch it. Okay, but now you can touch it. Now you can make these changes. I think this is a good place to maybe mention that we would love, if you've got a project that is thorny and you don't know how you would start iteratively replacing it versus just doing a full rewrite, we would love to have you on and we could talk about it and give you ideas and walk you through how to look at it. Just hit us up in the contact information, and we would hopefully have you on here because I think we can help.
Yeah, we have contact information in the show notes. We also have I think a Q&A on Spotify, so you can respond to that Q&A.
We do.
And
I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to get a Spotify account.
oh yeah. And yeah, there's multiple ways. I think also neverrewrite.com. There's contact information there as well. So yeah, if you want to come on the show, it's not nearly as scary as it might seem. And if it is, and you stutter and you're scared, we can edit all of that out and make you sound super confident. Maybe even auto-tune you while we're at it.
I want to be auto-tuned.
I actually have a version of the first episode where I gave everyone deep voices. I'll have to put that one out as an April Fool's joke. April Fool's episode.
That would be next episode. Awesome. Well, thanks for listening. I'm Jeffrey Sherman.
And I'm Isaac Askew, and this is Never Rewrite.